We have made it to the 2027 NFL Draft. We have been looking forward to this day for a little while. We just had our draft preview in the last episode, going over the draft class in depth, talking about what we can expect to see at the top of the draft, some players who we think the Dragons may very well look at. And in case you missed that episode, make sure to check out the series playlist where you can find any episode of the series. We talked about the mock drafts as well. Purdue defensive end Dean McKennedy is the favorite to go number one, but both of the top quarterbacks could go in that top spot. There's a number of other players on both sides of the ball who could be looked there as well. I think this is one of those years where there is not a consensus number one pick. As for us, we have 6 picks as of now, including pick 30 in the first round. But you guys know me. I love moving up and down the board as I see fit, and we will not be afraid to do so again. I think this draft is very important for us because since we've drafted so well, we're going to have to pay a lot of guys, particularly Puma Whitlock and Simeon Bonnet. Bonnet's on the last year of his deal. He will likely sign a record extension that could top out at around $50 million a year. Puma's going to be making even more than that. His 5th-year option is for around $63 million, and once he signs his extension, he'll be making similar, if not more, per year. Those two guys are going to take up close to half of our cap space, so because of that, we really have to look at these short and long term. There are certainly some positions we could look to upgrade for the immediate future, but some other positions, such as edge rusher, wide receiver, and corner, that maybe don't look like prevalent needs that we may look to draft sooner than later because we've got guys to pay at those spots. One more order of business before we get started. The draft class is up on the vault. I forget if Madden does cross-gen draft classes or not. I'm pretty sure they do, so I think this applies to everybody, but it certainly should for those who are on PS5. The class is called Dragons Draft 4, all caps, no spaces, and then the number 4 at the end. And you can also search my PSN if you would like to access any of the other draft classes throughout the series. So with that, we will get this show on the road. The 2027 NFL Draft is now officially open. The Green Bay Packers are on the clock with the number 1 pick. Which direction do they choose to go to? They've got multiple defensive players they could look at. They could go with either of the top quarterbacks, Ty Poland from Arizona State or Irwin Dundee from Ohio State. The Packers have really messed up their roster construction because Jordan Love was playing well for them and they were winning games. They decided to replace Love, though, drafting Johnny Gordon in the 2nd round last year, and he wasn't abysmal, but he wasn't good. And, there's a reason why this team only won 3 games and has the number 1 pick. Do they believe in Gordon enough to pass on one of the top QB prospects? With the first pick, the Green Bay Packers select Dean McKennedy, defensive end out of Purdue. So the Packers are all in on Johnny Gordon as they select Dean McKennedy, arguably the best defensive player in this year's draft class. The amount of polish he comes with, the amount of athleticism he comes with is really exciting. And folks, I think it's fair to say Green Bay made the right choice. McKennedy is an 87 overall, by far the highest rated player in this year's draft class and the highest rated player drafted in this series so far. Whoa, did they get themselves a stud? McKennedy, a potential long-term defensive building block as the Cowboys pick the other top defensive end, Dyson Dwayne out of Utah State. I didn't research this, but I have to imagine this is the first time Utah State has somebody going in the top 2. Unfortunately for Dallas, the gap between him and Dean McKennedy is a lot bigger than we expected. He's only a 73 overall with normal development. Not a bad pick, or not a bad player I should say, but considering the first pick was an 87 overall X Factor, I think they're a little disappointed. With the 3rd pick, we've got a trade. The Steelers are moving up 5 spots from picks 8 to 3, and they'll be giving up a lot to do so. Their 1st rounder this year, their 2nd rounder this year, 1st rounder next year, 3rd rounder the following year for this pick and a 4th rounder. The Steelers want their quarterback of the future, and it's Ty Poland from Arizona State. Ultimately, it is Ty Poland who's the first quarterback off the board. I think he has more physical upside than Irwin Dundee, which is why the Steelers chose to make this move. Ty Poland's got a rocket arm, makes plays out of structure. He's played a lot of football, 4-year starter with the Sun Devils, significantly improving every season. He comes in as a 76 overall and could very well be the Steelers' starting quarterback right away. They may decide to run it back with Jared Goff in the short term. Goff has played fairly well here over the last few seasons, but the Steelers want somebody who has the long-term physical upside to be great. They're sick of being mediocre. They want somebody who can challenge to be one of the best quarterbacks in the AFC. So with that, Poland is off the board, and these non-QB needy teams like the Saints must be happy because that means somebody really good like Kofi Oguntoye will fall. Oguntoye is the top offensive tackle in this class. New Orleans, of course, drafted Callaghan October #1 overall a couple years ago. You got to protect your golden goose, and Oguntoye should do exactly that. At 20 years old, he's already going to be one of the better left tackles in the league. 81 overall, hidden development, home run selection here for New Orleans. They must be ecstatic. With the 5th pick, the Giants select Amiri Jackson, tight end out of Maryland. Yes, a tight end makes his way into top 5. Jackson is an ultra-talented player who's just going to be the 3rd tight end in the 2000s to go in the top 5, joining Kyle Pitts and former Maryland Terrapin Vernon Davis. I don't think Jackson is quite the freak athlete that those guys are, but he's not far off. 6'7", 260, uses his power forward basketball background, as that'll bring us to the Las Vegas Raiders, and they will select Irwin Dundee, quarterback out of The Ohio State University. New head coach, new GM, and now new signal caller for the Las Vegas Raiders. Dundee is a 2-year starter with the Buckeyes, only 20 years old, one of the youngest players in this draft. Dundee was thrusted into the starting role last year as a redshirt freshman after their original quarterback got hurt, and he never gave the job up. 74 overall, but if you look at his stats, I think he is very polished. Needs to improve the deep ball, but he's got good accuracy across the board, makes plays out of structure. He doesn't have the elite arm talent, though, but I think he could still be one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Austin Esco, linebacker out of Wisconsin to the Washington Commanders. You don't see linebackers go in the top 10 very often unless they are special. This young man is special. 82 overall for Esco, 6'5", 250. He can cover. He can stop the run. This is somebody you're going to keep on the field on all 3 downs and look to build your defense around, such as the likes of Fred Warner, our very own Devin White. Noble Barnes goes into top 10 here at pick 8 to the Titans. This is a little bit of a surprise. When have we ever had 2 tight ends go in the top 10? Noble Barnes is a really good player. Don't let me get it twisted. But I don't think he should have been a top 10 pick. 76 overall with normal development. I give the Titans credit for getting all that value in the trade down, but you needed Noble Barnes to be a generational level talent to justify picking a tight end in the top 10. And I think he's going to be a good starter, but I don't know if he's going to be anything more than that. I think they really wanted Amiri Jackson, were surprised when he got picked, and panicked once he was off the board. Makari Grant goes to the Buccaneers. He's an interesting profile, 6'3", 230 pounds, but he's more than edge rusher. I think he needs to bulk up a little bit. He's kind of built like Nolan Smith coming out of Georgia. Not quite as athletic as Smith, but I think he's more polished as a pass rusher. The 80 overall might get you excited, and let me tell you, this guy really knows how to use his quickness and bend off the edge. He's a little bit of a one-trick pony as a pass rusher, but at only 21 years old, he's got plenty of time to improve. Kyon Sparks, wide receiver out of LSU, is the top receiver off the board. He goes to the Colts, looking to add some more pass catchers now that they are solidifying themselves under their quarterback, Anthony Richardson. It did seem like Sparks' stock had declined after the combine, running his 40 time at around 4.6, but that's not going to deter the Colts from making him the top receiver off the board, and I think for good reason. This guy's a stud. Great with the ball in his hands, phenomenal route runner. He doesn't have Bologna and speed, but he's 6'4", 230. He's physical and he can make it work. With the 11th pick, the Los Angeles Chargers select Samson Pomaro out of North Carolina. This is a guy whose stock has really gone up throughout the year. Had a great junior season with the Tar Heels, phenomenal combine, and he's a well-rounded pass rusher, somebody who you'll be able to be confident in having on the fields on all 3 downs. Only normal development, but I think this is a nice pick here for the Chargers. With the 12th pick, the Miami Dolphins select Roach Gordon the edge rusher out of Arizona. Another normal development player, but another guy with a super high rating, 79 overall. He's not a freak athlete, but I think he's polished. Another guy who really wins with quickness off the edge, probably going to have his hand in the dirt at 6'5", 270. Constanzo Yosuke goes to the Chicago Bears here at pick 13. They're still focused on building around Justin Fields, and they're going to give him another blocker. Yosuke comes in as a 75 overall. He does have hidden development. Overall, not a bad pick here for Chicago. Our division rivals, the 49ers, are on the clock, coming off a disappointing season last year, largely because of their defense. They're adding to the pass rush with Kylan Childs out of Oregon, and this is a great pick by San Francisco, as he is a 78 overall. Having him on one side and Nick Bosa on the other side is quite frightening. I don't like seeing our rivals making good picks, and the Niners do exactly that here with Childs, who flew under the radar because of all the hype around Dean McKennedy and Dyson Dwayne. He clearly looks like a better player than Dwayne, who ended up being the second overall pick to Dallas. New England here at 15 selects Jayon Exenor Jr. out of Army. Once upon a time this year, it looked like he could have been one of the top defensive players off the board. Still goes to the top half of the first round. Another guy who I think probably plays with his hand in the dirt as a defensive end. Cosmos Cortez, safety, goes to the Jets. Second North Carolina defensive player off the board. And yeah, this guy looks like a stud. 82 overall with hidden development. The Jets got themselves a beast in the back end of their secondary with Cortez, who's going to end up being one of the best players in the entire draft. The Bengals select Justin Lanham, cornerback out of Kansas. After running a blazing fast 40-yard time and testing really well at the combine, Lanham's stock surged, making him the top corner off the board. As a 74 overall, I think he's a little rough around the edges, but I think the upside with him is really good, and the Bengals are getting younger within the back end. Farouk Kingsman, guard out of Toledo, to the Minnesota Vikings. Offensive line may not be the sexy pick, but it's like getting socks for Christmas. It's going to do the job. Kingsman looks like a really good player, arguably the top interior offensive lineman in a loaded interior O-line class, as the Eagles select Babatunde Olawale Barbosa, the edge rusher out of New Mexico State. 6'8", 280. Really interesting physical profile. The Eagles traded away Elijah Wan and Bassa this offseason, so it's no surprise to see them picking an edge rusher here. We really liked Olawale Barbosa. We've got two guys who we're really targeting right now, and he was our second choice. So because of that, there's really only one guy I really want, and we may need to move up to get him, especially with the Seahawks and Rams coming up the board soon. Now, I will say, neither Seattle or the Rams need this position at all, and I don't think Denver does either, so I think we can wait a little while longer, but hopefully our player doesn't get picked within the next few selections. Denver selects Rio Van Leva, cornerback out of Florida. I think this kid's going to be the best corner in the draft. Good size, great versatility, more of the slot guy, but he has the physicality to play on the outside as well. Really strong run defender, smart kid, all-around good cover player. The Broncos have a loaded secondary as is, but it never hurts to get younger at a premium position. Kona Nwaolu out of Penn State goes to Seattle. Thank you, Seahawks, for not picking the guy we wanted, but Nwaolu looks like a pretty good player. Can stop the run, can go after the quarterback. Seattle has really prioritized making the front seven strong throughout this series, and they do it again here with Nwaolu. That'll bring us to the Los Angeles Rams, and they will be trading this pick away. Are the Dragons moving up with a division rival? No. No, we're not. The Browns are moving up 4 spots from 26 to 22, swapping some mid-rounders, including sending a third over to the Los Angeles Rams. So now I'm kind of panicking a little bit. Is Cleveland moving up to get the guy we want? They have some other needs, but I wouldn't rule it past them. The Browns select Chauncey Easley, defensive tackle out of Notre Dame. Easley's going to give them another body inside the middle of the defense. This is a physical player who's a really solid pass rusher, improving in the run game as well. And I think he's going to be a good fit here in Cleveland alongside Quinnen Williams, who they traded for a couple years ago. While he is a good player, he is not the guy we were targeting. I do think he's the guy Buffalo wanted because they just traded away Ed Oliver, and he would have been a perfect fit. So now the Bills are looking to get out of this pick, which works out really well for us wanting to move up. Seeing the framework of the Browns trade, we're going to work out something pretty similarly, but we're going to have to give up a little bit more, being that we're moving up from pick 30. So we'll be looking to send away 30. 94, and a future fifth to the Bills for 23 and 119. That wasn't enough, so I added defensive tackle Isaiah Torgenslam, who's been on the practice squad. The Bills really like him, though, and that's because he has star development. At 24 years old, they feel like they can really develop him, and with not being able to get Chauncey easily, that might be the next best route for them. So with that, the Dragons are on the clock here at pick 23. Who could be the guy that we're targeting? Do we want our own hand pick of all the running backs? Only one receiver off the board. These guys are slipping. Do we want to add to the offensive line? Plenty of good ones here, especially in the middle. Defensively, there is some talent at the interior defensive line and edge rushing spots, and there's also a lot of good players in the secondary still here as well. With the 23rd pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Ryan Nada, defensive back out of Michigan. So the Dragons are going back to the secondary. We've drafted safety very highly over the last couple of seasons. Samasoni Saluni in the second round of season 2. Jalen Bourgeois in the second round of last year. So why are we picking another safety with a super high pick? Well, the reason why I really like Ryan Nada is because the versatility that this young man has is incredible. 6'6", 223 pounds. I think there are so many different roles he can play on our defense. You can put him at free safety, have him as your center field cover guy, put him at strong safety and find ways to move him around the field. Put him as your box linebacker, have him blitz in the backfield, outside corner, inside corner. This kid can do everything. We don't have any glaring immediate holes on the defense, but there are a number of guys, Jeff Okudah, Owen Popo, Malik Hooker, etc., who are going to be entering the final years of their contracts. So the idea with Nada is we can play him pretty much anywhere, and eventually there may be a position that opens up that ends up being a necessity. He's a 78 overall here with every archetype, only normal development, but I think this kid's going to be really good. He's athletic, he can cover, he can tackle, he can stop the run, and again, he can play every position in the book. Incredible size, length, athleticism, and versatility. He's one of the most unique defensive players in this draft class, and I cannot wait to use him all over the defense. So the Dragons go back to the secondary, moving up for Michigan safety Ryan Nada, who was our top target all along. Sammy Vargas, center out of Toledo, goes to the Texans. The second Toledo interior offensive lineman off the board here in the first round. The Texans are getting somebody else who they can have block for their franchise quarterback, C.J. Stroud. The Texans have been really solid over the last couple of seasons, and now they're going to add another piece in the middle. That'll bring us to the Detroit Lions, who were a pleasant surprise last year with quarterback Amari August really taking a step as they select offensive tackle Kimo Hokulani. The long-term Taylor Decker replacement. Hokulani very well could challenge to start at left tackle right away. His brother, Keanu Hokulani, was the tight end who the Falcons drafted in the first round last year. The Rams moved down a few spots, and they're going to select Gustavo Il Martinez, offensive tackle out of Akron. They used a top 5 pick a couple seasons ago on Jake Louis, the tackle out of Alabama. That ended up being a great selection. Now they're going to look to get their left tackle spot solidified with Gustavo Il Martinez. The New York Giants got this pick in the Dexter Lawrence trade earlier in the offseason as they go Andromache Coyote. I'm very surprised that he ended up going over some of these other receivers like Jaquan Stennis, who's really slipping, and Zaire Copels Jr. I do think this fit makes a lot of sense, though, for the Giants. Coyote's raw. He's only a 70 overall, but he has the highest ceiling of any receiver in this class. 6'4", 230, ridiculous athleticism, really good hands. He's not a good route runner or good separator yet, but the long-term upside is super high. The Giants have some good receivers, but they could use that alpha dog, and he's got that type of potential. Devontae Quick, guard out of UCLA, goes to the Chiefs. Kansas City's roster is legitimately insane. They have pretty much no holes other than a couple spots on the offensive line. Lucky for them, there's plenty of good O-linemen on the board, and Devontae Quick is going to be added to the group. The Jacksonville Jaguars select Bruin Wilson, the Bruin corner out of UCLA. This is a guy whose stock has skyrocketed throughout the year. Fringe top 100 pick when we originally talked about him, but the NFL really likes him, and for good reason. 79 overall, super talented player. The Bills moved down 7 spots earlier with us as they go with tight end Sonny Kotal. They let go of Dalton Kincaid in the offseason, but they want to make sure that they've got young talent here at the tight end position, and they go with Kotal out of Cincinnati. Have we ever had 3 tight ends in the first round in, like, the modern era, or at least the last, like, 30 years? I don't think so. The Carolina Panthers select Badger Hawkins, defensive tackle out of the Ohio State University. Of course, the Panthers continue to add more talent. Spoiler alert, this guy has superstar X Factor. I think there's around probably 6 X Factor players in the class. And of course, the Panthers, who might be the biggest threat in the NFC, add another one. Him and Derek Brown together, along with Jeffrey Simmons, is going to be nasty. The Baltimore Ravens are on the clock here, the Super Bowl champions, but not for long. The Raiders are moving up 6 spots, swapping some mid-round picks. The Raiders drafted their franchise quarterback earlier today, Irwin Dundee. Got to imagine they're going to look to give him some help as they select wide receiver Cassius Middleton out of SMU. The Raiders' receiving core is legitimately awful. They've got Jacoby Myers, who's old, Tyler Boyd, who's really old, and nothing else. Cassius Middleton may very well be their best receiver right away, and there are some receivers with higher ceilings on the board, like Jaquan Stennis and Zaire Copels, but they want somebody who they know can play. That'll wrap up the first round. Certainly an interesting start. 87 overall, Dean McKennedy ends up being the first pick. We had the 2 quarterbacks go, Ty Poland at 3 to the Steelers and Irwin Dundee at 6 to the Raiders. And as for the Dragons, moving up for Ryan Nada out of Michigan. That'll bring us into the second round, and there are a number of surprise players still on the board. Obviously, these receivers in specific. Jaquan Stennis was supposed to be the first receiver off the board, and now he is free-falling. Zaire Copels Jr. I thought was going to go in the first round. Chester Bishop, I think, is a little bit of a surprise. Some of these defensive players as well. I think we could very well see a run on defense. And then Tyler Nguyen, the Oklahoma State quarterback, does not go in the first round. So because of that, I think it's going to be a little while until he hears his name here in round 2. The Packers select Amadou Linden, the edge rusher out of Arkansas. Once upon a time, he was looked at as a top 5 pick, but his stock slipped a little bit. Katulia Chopra out of Bowling Green to the Cowboys. And then the Titans pick Zalorian Brazil, running back out of Florida. The top running back is off the board, a position that the Dragons have been heavily linked to in this draft. Brazil's a really good player, and the last time the Titans drafted a Florida running back within an octagonal gaming Madden franchise, that guy was Elijah Bryant, who ended up being really good. Brazil's not going to have Derrick Henry with him, though, so I'm curious to see how he does. And then the Saints, with the very next pick, get a running back as well. Rashad Price Jr. out of Georgia, an amazing pass-catching back. He comes in as an 80 overall. I think he'll be a great complement with Tyler Algier, and he'll be a big-time weapon for Callaghan October. So the running backs are starting to go. Do the Dragons really want to use a high pick on a running back? And if they do, will they choose to move up to make sure they get one of the top guys in this class? We'll see if there's continuing to be a run on running backs as the Giants pick Wallace Phillip, safety out of Georgia. The defending champion Baltimore Ravens selected Darius Winston out of Georgia. And then the Commanders finally select Jaquan Stennis, the wide receiver out of Kentucky, who I thought was going to be a top 15 pick. And ultimately, I think the NFL got it right with him. Stennis is not a bad player at all. 75 overall with hidden development. But he's not as good as Kyon Sparks. He doesn't have the upside that Andromache Coyote does. And he's not as good as Cassius Middleton. Stennis is a good player, but I think second round was really more of his range. And the league ultimately got his evaluation correct. The Titans are back on the clock yet again, and they will select Yohan Vilmas, the center out of Ohio State. That'll bring us to the Buccaneers. I think this could be a sneaky Tyler Nguyen location. They will not pick the quarterback, instead going with Isaac Zeus, safety out of Georgia Tech. The Colts are on the clock next. They go with Olun Monafagu, the defensive tackle out of Arkansas. The Bills pick guard Makoa Kahahanui. They got that pick from the Chargers in the Ed Oliver trade. Ron Carmichael to the Dolphins. Frank Jones IV to the Bears. Chicago solidifying the right side of the offensive line. Cormani Edwards out of Texas Tech to the 49ers. New England picks a running back. Jyrell Tate out of Oregon. That's 3 running backs off the board now. And of the top guys, there's only 2 left. Milan Santa from Memphis and Darion Wiseman from South Alabama. Do the Dragons really covet one of these guys, or are they confident in Darwin Juskins, who is a very good player, taking the reins as the lead running back? Woody Mace, guard out of Auburn to the Jets. The Bengals are on the clock, but not for long. We've got a trade, and it's an NFC West team, but not the Dragons. The Seattle Seahawks will be moving up a few spots, turning a 5th into a 7th. The Bengals feel like the guy that they wanted to pick is going to last a little longer, so they're going to get a better day 3 pick, while Seattle selects Tyler Nguyen, quarterback out of Oklahoma State. This is a really interesting pick because Bryson Bouwon's a pretty good player, but he's entering the last year of his contract, and Seattle is very unsure on if they want to give him a long-term extension. Nguyen is going to be a 77 overall with hidden development. He's basically the same player that Bryson Bouwon is now, so I think we very well could see them eventually move off of Bouwon, who is, again, a very similar talent, very similar play style, but he's 3 years older, and Nguyen is going to restart the financial clock. Reed Wallace to the Vikings, Amir Slaughter to the Philadelphia Eagles. I thought Slaughter could go in the first round after a great combine, but he slips to the second. Rayleigh Bitter to the Broncos. Jude Osgood-Pocus, linebacker out of Tulane to the Bengals. Osgood-Pocus is a guy who was a fringe top 100 pick for a while, but he tore it up at the combine. I mean, I don't know if there was a bigger winner in Indianapolis than Osgood-Pocus. He was being looked at as a first rounder, but he actually falls out of the top 50 picks, and that's because he's just not all that good. Freak athlete, but I think the league, again, got his evaluation right. Leonardo Silva out of Arizona State to the Rams. Dylan Wilson goes to the Bills. Demas Williams, really fun receiver. He's small but talented. He goes to the Texans. That'll bring us to the Lions, and I want to talk about some of these receivers real quick, especially Zaire Copels. Now that we're having guys like Williams projected in the third round going, there's a real reason why Copels is dropping. Cole Cobra to the Lions. They let go of Sam Laporta. He signed with the Packers. That makes me want to throw up. So now they get his replacement. Benedict Manson goes to the Browns. And then Atlanta, with their first pick of the day, selects Tate Melendez, quarterback out of Middle Tennessee State. Desmond Ritter's been really good for them, but I guess he's not getting any younger. He's 28 years old, and the Falcons kind of feel like his ceiling has been capped a little bit. And they also don't have the backup as well. The Falcons are right back up. They've got back-to-back selections, and they go with Shea Diggs, safety out of Maryland. So now that we're having third-round safeties go, it's time to talk about Chester Bishop, the USC safety. He is dropping like a fly as well. The Jaguars select Dom McKnight, really talented receiver, but another receiver not named Zaire Copels. And that'll bring us to the St. Louis Dragons here at the 30th pick of the second round with some surprise fallers like Bishop and Copels. Having already drafted a safety today, I don't think Chester Bishop is really in play, but Zaire Copels certainly could be. Both of the running backs, Santa and Wiseman, are still there. Keep in mind the Dragons don't pick again until the late fourth round, so if they want one of the big-time running backs, now would be the time to do so. But Zaire Copels Jr. falling this far might be too hard to pass up. So ultimately, what direction did the Dragons go with? Do they pick one of the two running backs, or do they go with the falling receiver, who could very well be a long-term replacement for somebody like Griffin Weaver or Tykeem Keon? With the 62nd pick in the 2027 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Milan Santa, running back out of Memphis. DeAndre Swift is gone. We've got some good talent in the backfield. I like Darwin Juskins a lot. Tornado Davis, I think, takes a leap up. But truthfully, I don't think that's going to be enough. Adding a guy here like Milan Santa will drastically open up the offense as he comes in with hidden development. We've been coveting this kid since we first turned on the film. We believe that Santa is the best running back, not just on the board currently, but in the draft, period. This is a big play threat who can break out the big runs, but he's also got physicality and toughness. He's an every down runner who can give you tough yardage, and he can break out the big one. He's one of the better pass-catching backs in the draft as well. He knows how to get open, and obviously with the ball in his hands, he is special. He's not necessarily a freak athlete, 5'11", 195, 4'5", 40-yard dash, but he's still a good athlete, and I think his well-roundedness is why the Dragons are ultimately going to really like him. 77 overall, he's a 76 receiving back and a 69 power back. Nice. The other running backs in this class are not as well-rounded with him. So even though of the top 5 running backs in the class, he's the 4th highest rated one to start, I think he's going to be the best one. And I think the Dragons made a home run selection here at the end of the second round. To round out round 2, it's Zaire Copels Jr. to the Carolina Panthers. I don't really know why Copels slipped. If he had fallen a little bit farther, I would have been really tempted about moving up for him. He comes in as a 72 overall with hidden development, but I think the upside would have been worth a top 50 pick. I get that he's a little bit raw, and that's probably what scared some teams off, but I think he's a really good player. The Panthers traded up for another Middle Tennessee State receiver, Matthias Abanda, a few years back, and they're going to go back to the Blue Raiders. Darian Wiseman is the final pick here in round 2 to the Baltimore Ravens. He's a 78 overall. And with that, the top 5 running backs are all off the board in the second round. We knew that Santa and Wiseman were not going to fall much farther, so getting Milan Santa when we did was clearly a good decision. That'll round out round 2. 5 running backs, a number of receivers, and 1 QB. Tyler Nguyen going to our division rival, the Seattle Seahawks. The Dragons do not currently have the pick in the 3rd round, but again, you guys know me. If there's somebody that we want, and there are a number of players I like, we very well may look to move up. We've got 2 4th-rounders right now. We have a 5th and a 6th as well, along with plenty of future picks that we can look to play with. In terms of the guys left on the board, I think Chester Bishop, the USC safety, has to be the biggest surprise. I thought he was a lock for the 1st round. Felipe Pena, the receiver out of Arkansas, is a little bit of a surprise. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a number of quarterbacks off the board here. I think Jamison Fletcher from SMU likely would be the top one. So let's get the 3rd round started as Jason Karamoa goes to the Packers, Zane Robinson to the Cowboys, Gerard Walker, big-time riser after the combine of the Titans. The Saints pick a quarterback, Cam Lamont out of Miami. This is a surprise. Kelligan October is obviously their guy, but I guess they really wanted a good backup. They don't have a second stringer on the roster. Chester Bishop finally off the board here to the New York Giants with the 5th pick in the 3rd round. Xavion Springs goes to the Raiders. Zane Ferdinand to Washington. He looked like a possible 1st-rounder. Slips to the 3rd-rounder, but he ended up being like a 78 overall. Jamison Fletcher to the Buccaneers. That pick makes a lot of sense. Deacon Adderley's on the last year of his deal. He hasn't shown that he can be a franchise quarterback, so the Buccaneers are going to look at another young quarterback here with Fletcher. Size Teak Youngblood Jr. out of Tennessee to the Dolphins. Steph Killian to the Bears, Chicago's 3rd offensive lineman of the day. Natano Tui, tight end of the Niners. Carol Weathers goes to New England. Max Belfort to the Green Bay Packers. Cincinnati gets Osynthion Cannon. I thought he was going to be a really good target for us in like the 4th or 5th round. He goes a lot earlier than expected, but good player. That'll bring up the Vikings, but not for long. The Dragons have identified a player they would like to move up for, and so they're going to look to do so. They're going to offer 119 and 190. That's not going to move the needle, unfortunately. I'm not willing to do both of the 4ths, so we're going to wait a little bit longer and hope somebody else is willing to make a deal. As the Vikings pick running back Ainge Peak, the Eagles pick a defensive end, the Broncos pick linebacker Sir Lionel Hillingham out of Texas A&M. You may remember his brother Sir Broderick Hillingham was the guy who went in the top 10 and ended up being the biggest idiot on the planet. Sir Lionel Hillingham is kind of the same way. 52 awareness, 43 play rack. Not as dumb as his brother, but he's probably not as good either. That'll bring us to the Seattle Seahawks, but not for long. This pick is on the move. With Seattle trading up for Tyler Nguyen in the 2nd round, they wanted to make up for the day 3 picks they lost. And we're going to ultimately move up, trading a 4th and a 5th, and then swapping a future 6th for a future 7th. So with that, the Dragons are back on the board here in the 3rd round, trading up for a 2nd time today. Who is it going to be for? Number of good players here. So with the 21st pick in the 3rd round of the 2027 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Scotty Pickens Jr. No, I'm kidding. That's nepotism. Penultimo Barahona, linebacker out of UCLA. He's one of the older players in the draft at 24 years old, but very similarly to our top pick, Ryan Nada, this is a guy who probably can play several different positions at a high level, and the versatility tempts us enough to move up and get him. He only comes in at normal development, which is not ideal given his age, but this is a really interestingly built player. He's 6'2", 263 pounds, built like an edge rusher, but he's mostly played off ball at UCLA, and that's probably where he's going to play here. Barahona is a physical, downhill player, great tackler, hard hitter, pretty solid in coverage, and I like what he can do as a blitzer and as a pass rusher. I think he's got the versatility to play on the edge because obviously he's got the size to do it, 6'2", 263. He's got the strength to do it, and I think his pass rush moves are pretty solid. He certainly has the athleticism and range to play off the ball as well. So this is a guy who you can use as an edge rusher. You can use him as a traditional linebacker. And I think his uniqueness is why he's going to be a successful player. Similarly to Ryan Nada, I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to play this guy, but luckily for us, we've got multiple positions that we could slide him into, and I think Penultimo Barahona is going to be a really fun player for our defense. So the Dragons move up again, adding in another physical freak on the defensive side of the ball. The Rams select Darion Fuller out of Georgia, possible first-rounder for a while, but his stock slipped. Norbert Hendrick to the Bills. Burt Beans to the Texans. The Lions add to the offensive line. The Rams add to the defensive line with Bubba Duggins. Nico McDaniel to Atlanta. Jameer Johnson to the Chiefs. Jordan Wake goes to Jacksonville. Xavier Boxer to the Bills. The Broncos get Scotty Pickens Jr., corner out of Arizona. Another defensive back for the Broncos, who drafted Rio Van Leva in the first round. And again, they don't really need corner, at least in the short term. I was tempted by the idea of picking Scotty Pickens Jr., but we don't want any nepotism in our organization. We don't need to have the coach's son on the roster, and ultimately he ends up in the Mile High City. The Ravens will round out the third round with edge rusher Nolan Jordan out of Michigan State, and that'll wrap up day 2. That'll wrap up the third round. The Dragons went into round 3 without any picks, but they ultimately decide to move up and select Penultimo Barahona, the linebacker out of UCLA, who I'm really excited about. This defense is going to be so much fun. All these guys who can play so many different positions together. And now entering day 3, we don't have a lot of picks left. Gone are the days where we had 5 picks in the 5th round. We only have 2 picks left. We've got a 4th rounder from Kansas City and our own 6th rounder. I don't think this is a super deep draft class here in day 3, which is why we only have 2 picks. Now, there are a number of guys I still like on the board, and I think we're going to continue to add talent, but we've had seasons with like 7, 8 day 3 picks, and at least for right now we have 2, but being that we've traded up twice already, don't be surprised when there's potentially a trade down. So let's kick off round 4 here. Chandre West, the Saints, ended up being a 76 overall. Good pick for New Orleans. Carolina picks Felipe Pena, the wide receiver out of Arkansas. Comes in as a 71 with normal. I guess his slip was kind of warranted. I'm very intrigued here by the Panthers' strategy. They are fully focused on best player available, and they've taken a shot on 2 slipping receivers. First it was Copels, then it was Pena. 2 guys who we thought could go in the first round, and Carolina gets both of them, and they each go outside of the first round. Caleb Parker, big-bodied receiver to the Bucks. Mauricio Escala-Salazar, quarterback to the Colts. The Chargers get Wardell Simpson, the son of Cardell Simpson. Again, no nepotism here, even though Cardell Simpson isn't really with our organization, but point remains. Talented corner joining the Chargers. I was hoping Simpson or Scotty Pickens Jr. would end up in Tennessee, but unfortunately it doesn't happen. Abdul Donaldson to the Dolphins. The Bears pick their 4th offensive lineman with Cameron Scott. Cornbed Franklin goes to the Chargers. Danny Hines in Cleveland. Bobby Juice to the Bengals. Nuovo Calciatore, quarterback out of Navy to the Vikings. Possible first rounder at the beginning of the year. Ends up here on day 3. Reggie Burnham, wide receiver out of Arizona State to Seattle. I don't like when our division rivals make good picks, and this is a really good pick. As I mentioned earlier, I think there's around 6 X Factors in this class, a number of whom are projected to go in day 3. Reggie Burnham was one of them. So now our division rivals get an X Factor receiver to join DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Not great. The Rams get another receiver, Dante St. Pierre. Seattle right back on the clock gets Boomer Broadway. Zeke Vegas, 77 overall receiver to the Texans. Ellis Key, another really good player out of Georgia. Had we not drafted Ryan Nada, Key would have been heavily on our radar here in the 4th round, as the Dragons are now on the clock. I mentioned the idea of trading down. We've already moved up twice today, and there are some good players here, but I would love to move down into the early 5th round and add another day 3 pick if possible, and luckily the Buccaneers are willing to do that. They're willing to move up around 15 spots here in the 4th round and give us their 7th round pick. Tampa Bay ended up trading up for Bruno Mordecai. The Miami corner stays in Florida. And then rounding out the 4th round, Storm Freeman to the Panthers, and the Ravens get Jonathan Givens. So the Dragons do not use a pick here in the 4th round. We move back. We add an additional day 3 pick in the 7th round. So at least for now, we have picks in rounds 5, 6, and 7. A lot of really talented players here in round 4. But again, I think last year's draft class was deeper. I think next year's class is going to be a little bit deeper. But still some guys who I like entering the 5th round. Dungeons Morningbrook to the Cowboys. Midas Mecole Jr. out of Washington is finally off the board. He's a 75 overall. I don't know how he fell to the 5th round. And had he been on the board for us, I would have absolutely considered him. I don't know if I would have pulled the trigger, but I certainly would have thought about it. 6'6", big physical receiver. Great pick here by the Tennessee Titans, who I think other than their first-round pick have had a great draft. Getting pretty close to our pick as D. Warner II goes to the Giants, Hurricane Howard to the Raiders, Tyreek Shepard to the Commanders, and then the Steelers get running back Charlie Finnegan out of Texas. So the Dragons are on the clock here with the 9th pick in round 5. Got some intriguing players on the board, and we will not look to trade down. We're going to stick and pick. With the 9th pick in the 5th round of the 2027 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Cohen Della Vienna, edge rusher out of Utah. So St. Louis is going to pick another defensive player. Of our 4 picks so far, 3 of them are on the defensive side of the ball. We've had a lot of success with drafting day 3 defensive linemen in this series, and we're hoping that Cohen Della Vienna is next on the list. At 6'3", 302 pounds, this is a versatile defensive lineman who I think we can put at defensive end. I think we can put him inside at defensive tackle. We're super deep on the D-line, but not just Simeon Bonnet, but we have other guys who are expiring as well. Trajan Blyschenden's a free agent after this year. DeJuan Overton's a free agent after this year. Obviously, we can't pay everybody, so it's going to be very important to add somebody else up front. Along with guys like Blyschenden and Overton, we've drafted other good defensive linemen on day 3. Nnamdi Sanaga had a good rookie year last year. Orlin Babylon hasn't shown a lot, but I think he has a lot of upside. And now Della Vienna is added to the pass rush room, coming in as a 69 overall. Nice. I think physically, he's a little bit less athletic, but he's built like Simeon Bonnet at 6'3", 300 pounds. Bonnet's a little bit taller, but they both have the same type of weight and versatility and strength. I'm not saying he's going to be Simeon Bonnet or anything close, but I think physically there are some similarities. Let's make it through the rest of round 5 now. George Crawford to the Steelers. The offensive linemen are falling like flies. Chris Tate Jr. to the Niners. Really good pick. And then the Jets pick quarterback Marlon Byfield out of Oregon. This is a very interesting selection because Marlon Byfield has superstar X Factor. Again, as I mentioned, there's a few X Factors here on day 3, and if there's really any team who I felt like needed to pick an X Factor quarterback on day 3 like Marlon Byfield, it's probably the Jets because they've rotated a ton of guys at quarterback throughout this series. Obviously, after Aaron Rodgers retired, they traded for Will Levis. They signed Trey Lance. They signed Jordan Love this year, and now they finally might get their guy. There's one X Factor left on the board, and it's Uwo Oganu, who goes with the very next pick to the Bengals. Oganu is a blocking tight end, so maybe he can be like a Kyle Juszczyk type. We were hoping he would fall to our pick in the 6th round, but clearly that was never going to happen as Oganu is gone, and the final X Factor, at least to my knowledge, has been picked. Maybe there's a couple others that I forgot about or never even noticed. Alfonso Merriweather off the board here to the Minnesota Vikings. The Eagles get Earthquake O'Connell, running back out of Boise State. Brock Hard to the Broncos. The Bengals add to the secondary. The Browns out of running back. A lot of running backs off the board here on day 3. Hezekiah Miller to Seattle. The Seahawks, I think, have had a great draft. Draymond Weston to Atlanta. I think that's a nice pick. Seth Middlebrook to Atlanta. Tunzi Adelaide to the Eagles. And then rounding out the 5th round, the Ravens get Will Knowles, tackle out of Georgia. Will Knowles was a guy we really wanted. I guess it's a good thing that the Ravens picked him because he's only like a 64 overall, so I think we dodged a bullet there, but he was our top target going into the 6th round, and because of that, I felt like we kind of had to make a move. There's really only one guy who I really like left in this draft, so I'm going to trade both of our remaining picks, 190 and 201 to the Green Bay Packers for this selection, 161, along with a future 7th rounder. I was able to squeak that out of them. So the Dragons now only have one more pick here, our final selection of the day. With the 161st pick, the St. Louis Dragons select Gift Aaron Jr., tight end out of Indiana. I was hoping to get one of the day 3 offensive linemen, but there's nobody else who I think is really draftable. And the only guy who I really wanted left is Gift Aaron. So he will be our final selection of the day, coming in with normal development at tight end. We have not drafted a tight end in this series at all until right now. It took us 4 seasons to do so. Obviously, having Isaiah Likely has been the main reason why. But I've been wanting to add depth in the draft for about 3 years now. It hasn't happened, and finally it does here with Gift Aaron. Big physical receiver, 6'6", really impressive athlete, which is why I was a little bit surprised that he ended up falling to the 6th round. He's an adequate blocker, certainly not bad in that regard, and he'll challenge with Sincere Lorenzo to be our number 2 tight end and possibly get some reps at fullback as well. Aaron's going to come in as a 69 overall. Nice. So overall, a pretty solid pick here for round 6, and being that there wasn't really anybody else I was super interested in, I think we made the right move by ultimately moving up, getting a guy we like here at a position that we don't need a starter in, obviously, but we do need depth, and I think he could be a long-term starter. Isaiah Likely's got 3 years left on his deal, but eventually that contract's going to be up, and we may not give him a 3rd deal, and maybe Gift Aaron could be the long-term replacement. So with that, we're going to make it through the rest of the draft. There's no other moves I really want to make for us, and there aren't any super notable players left on the board. This is how round 6 ended up going. Some solid value selections. Jaleel Embria, the running back out of Washington, a 72 overall to the Giants. Udalis Duck III to the Jets, also a 72 overall at corner. And then moving into the 7th round, where we did not have any picks here. Some solid selections. Rocket Nash, wide receiver, 71 overall, goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. Another 71, actually 2 more 71 receivers, with Detroit going to, ironically, Green Bay. And then the Colts adding 1. As for Mr. Irrelevant, the Chargers ends up selecting safety Ron Perkins, a player who was projected to go in the 3rd round, but he makes it all the way to the final pick of the draft. So that'll do it for the 2027 NFL Draft. Our Dragons only ended up with 5 picks, but I think we really made the most of them, adding some unicorns to the defense with Ryan Nada and Penultimo Barahona. We added a running back, Milan Santa, who's going to play a lot as a rookie, and some good day 3 picks with Cohen Della Vienna and Gift Aaron. Let's take a look at our schedule for the season before we wrap up the episode. Our Week 1 game will be against C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans at home. We have 8 primetime games this year scattered throughout the season. The world clearly wants to see the Dragons, with almost half of our games being nationally televised, which is really exciting, and that shows that our team is in a really good spot, short-term and long-term. Next episode, we're going to get through the preseason and kick off season number 5 against the Houston Texans. Let me know what you thought of our draft down below. As you guys know, these draft episodes always take a lot of work, so I'd really appreciate a like. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe as well. Peace out.